Good evening, everyone. I'll call our meeting to order here in the committee of the whole room at 6 p.m. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Alderperson Murphy. Present. Macias.
Present.
Zach.
Present.
Finian.
Present.
Finch. President McNeil.
Present.
Castro. Smith.
Present.
No remote electronic attendance. Public comment.
None, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any questions on the agenda? No adjustments. So we'll begin with our roundtable discussion. 7.1 Environmental Resiliency Plan Progress Update and Discussion. Who's taking it over?
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm just going to introduce Blue Strike, who is here visiting for the week doing engagement, community engagement. We've done a steering committee meeting. We've done a public meeting. We had an environmental focus group today, and we gave them a tour around Moline this afternoon. So I'm happy to have them here to present the update. We have Anna Bugankova and Rich Swanson, and they'll be giving you the update and discussion.
Thank you.
Is there a mic? Do you have which slides? Is there a mic?
No microphone, David.
No.
Okay. You just have to speak up, I guess.
All right, I'll do my best. Thank you for the introduction, Dawn, and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. As Dawn mentioned, we're here visiting this time for community engagement, for staff engagement, and we had a great city tour today. Thank you so much for the project team, Dawn, Denver, Jennifer, and Ashley. I really appreciate you showing us around. We wanted to do a quick update on the environmental resiliency plan today and have a couple of questions for discussion. So, quick introduction. My name is Anna Bugankova. I've been working with Dawn and the rest of the team for the past couple of months on the environmental resiliency plan, and I'm here with Rich Swanson.
Hello. Nice to meet everyone.
So for today's agenda, we're going to start with the plan. I believe we gave a quick update earlier in the project, but wanted to remind everybody where we're at today. So we're going to remind everybody what environmental resiliency planning is. Then do a quick overview of greenhouse gas emissions inventories, tell you what those inventories are, how they can be used in the future. Then talk about the project framework, give a recap of community and staff engagement, mention vulnerability assessment, and then dive into some of the discussion questions that we have prepared. So first is environmental resiliency planning, and what it is, and it's essentially balance between environment, economy, and society.
No, you can come up here and speak if you want to.
Oh, it's okay. I got the slides here. I should have prepared better for the issues. But anyway, so what is environmental resiliency planning? So essentially, one of the considerations that we make here is balancing environment, economy, and society, and taking into account all of the other priorities we have, such as economic development, addressing various issues that you have for the city. It's responsible resource management. So essentially, thinking about that, our resources are not finite. How do we manage resources in a responsible way while serving communities equally, which is the next bullet point, equity and inclusion. How do we distribute the benefits equally across all members of the community? It's reduction of emissions and environmental impacts, which we're going to talk a little bit more when we talk about greenhouse gas inventories. But with initiatives such as renewable energy, transportation, reduction of fossil fuels, energy efficiency programs, how can we reduce emissions and reduce environmental impacts as well? And lastly, it's more kind of like a vision. Bullet here is meeting today's needs while stewarding resources for future generations. How can we preserve the city? How can we make it better for future generations to come? So here's an overview of deliverables of the plan. And this is a kind of like a high level overview here. But first bullet is emissions inventory with baseline data and forecasts. So understanding what our biggest sources of emissions are, where they're coming from, how can we address those sources of emissions. Next deliverable is a community-wide framework addressing local and regional challenges. So the framework is essentially what we're going to be using to build strategies for this plan and understanding what are the sectors that we need to address in this project. Vulnerability assessment, identifying major threats and hazards. It's essentially an assessment that will also guide our development of the strategies, understanding what are the biggest threats for your community, environmental, climate-related stress, non-climate-related stressors, and how we can be mindful of those stressors while designing initiatives for this plan. Perhaps the biggest part of this plan and deliverables will be pollution reduction and resilience strategies for all of the sectors that we're going to be talking about today. It's essentially coming up with a roadmap and identifying, first of all, biggest issues that we want to address, and then creating a roadmap to address those issues that will then be supplemented by a comprehensive plan with funding sources, identifying resources that we need, various milestones and timelines and tracking metrics for us to be able to track successes of the initiatives of the plan. And so here is a project progress overview. So we wanted to give everybody a sense of the timeline. So the project started in July last year. And for the first couple of months, essentially what we've been doing is collecting data from the utilities, collecting data from different plans, Moline-based plans, county plans, statewide plans, and understand what is being pursued at the moment and how we can integrate your existing initiatives in this plan to make sure that it's supplemental to the work that you're already doing, and what kind of initiatives we can come up with in the future. And right now, we are in the stage of community outreach and engagement. So we're hoping to end this phase at the end of March or at the end of February. And then starting from March, that will be kind of like a place where we put together all of the feedback that we have gathered from community and stakeholder engagement, vulnerability assessments, greenhouse gas inventories, combining all of these findings and designing strategies for this plan. And the end goal for this plan is adoption in June 2026. So here's a quick overview of the greenhouse gas inventories that we talked about earlier. So essentially, what are greenhouse gas inventories? It's essentially like a framework and a study to understand what are the biggest sources of emissions in your community, what sectors they're coming from, and kind of understanding the scale of these emissions. And I want to highlight that this is still work in progress. We're still working on refining those inventories, so the results might not be final here. So we'll be potentially making changes to those, but I just want to highlight before we jump ahead with those. But essentially, that's a preliminary breakdown of what emissions for Moline look like. And what community scale inventory means, it means sources of emissions that come from all sectors, residential, commercial, industrial. It accounts for everything that happens within the city boundaries. And like we see here on the screen is electricity is one of the primary sources of emissions. So this information will be used to figure out what strategies we need to prioritize, and we want to prioritize strategies to address emission reduction in the electricity sector. Then it's followed by transportation and fossil fuel sectors. Fossil fuels in this case will be primarily natural gas. So what it can tell us is, do we want to focus on electrification? Do we want to focus on energy efficiency initiatives to be able to reduce some of this fossil fuel usage? And then we also have smaller sectors such as solid waste and water that you can see on the screen here. So essentially what it does, this is an overview of emissions within 1 year. In this case, it's 2024. And these emission studies can be done every so often, understanding what are the trajectories of the current city's initiatives, how emissions can be reduced down the road. And that essentially gives us a perspective and a baseline to start with so we can measure progress down the road. And then on this slide, you can see another inventory, which is specifically for municipal operations. And municipal operations includes all city-owned facilities. And the breakdown here looks a little bit different. So you can see still electricity accounts for the biggest sector of emissions here, followed by transportation, fossil fuels, and commuting. So again, this inventory will be informing the strategies as well. It also gives us a baseline to be able to track progress in the future. And this inventory is also preliminary. We are conducting further studies to understand the exact emission sources and understand the exact emission amount. So these results may change, so this is a preliminary metric so far. For that, Rich, I'll pass it to you.
Great, thank you, Anna. Before I dive into this, I just wanted to pause and see if anybody has any questions about what's already come or, yeah.
I just thought of this. I didn't see the numbers on the back two slides. What percentage of the total emissions are generated by the city?
About 3%,
Okay, that's a small.
small amount.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's, which is fairly typical for US communities. You know, it's about, usually ranges between 2 and 4%. They are significant. One of the reasons that we carved them out to measure them is because unlike the rest of emissions that happen within the city boundaries, you have some sort of direct control. So there are direct initiatives that government can put in place to kind of control its own or reduce its own. You know, sometimes there are pilots that can be done with municipal facilities and properties that help accelerate things into the community. So it's a strategic segment, but yeah, a small segment. Yeah.
I just have a question. For the community scale, is there a breakdown between like residential and business or manufacturing, or is there a way to measure that, or are we getting to that?
There is a way to measure that. Sometimes the utilities won't, they'll usually give you big chunks. Sometimes they don't break it down between commercial and industrial, but we do have data, I think, that is residential versus commercial. Yeah. Yeah, James.
So I was just looking at this and where like we have 70% of our emissions is coming from electricity. So if we were to make a change saying to something, I mean, wouldn't we be trying to push more into the electricity bucket? Like even though that's the most of our emissions, is like, what's the best emissions? Because I don't believe the zero is gonna be possible.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, if you're burning natural gas or any other fossil fuel, your emissions are going to be the same whether they're going to be the same today or tomorrow. The same natural gas is going to produce the same amount of emissions. That's not true for electricity because it is possible, though difficult sometimes, it's possible to remove carbon from the mix of generation activities that are producing that electricity. You can go from coal to hydropower. You can go from natural gas, to wind and solar. And so because those moves are possible, there's a big push for electrification of natural gas equipment into electricity. So that's one part of the answer, I think, to your question. The other is there are substitutes, local substitutes for grid level electricity, where that might have a mix of coal and natural gas that's driving up emissions from your electricity. You can do rooftop solar, you can do local solar like the new plant that you have going in town. So things like that will also reduce that electricity number in terms of overall emissions. Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of approach that.
So part of my job is to sit on the Bi-State Regional Transportation Commission, and we review the exceedances in air quality every year. And they've been particularly sensitive recently because of the wildfires that keep happening in Canada, and then all of that stuff coming here and impacting our numbers. How much of any of that kind of consideration of
what's outside of our control is part of your method?
Yeah, that's a great question. So none of that is reflected here.
Okay.
This would all be drivers of emissions from within
From here.
city
Okay,
borders.
got it.
Yeah.
Then, but there is something now close that's proposed. I just saw a story this morning, a power plant in Scott County. That's just across the river, something that would impact these numbers in some way?
Possibly. So what kind of power plant is it?
Don't know.
You're not sure.
I think
So
it's natural
wherever
gas.
Mid-American buys their power, those are impacting that electricity sector
Okay.
over there. So if they're, I mean, just looking at that percentage, and as Anna mentioned, we're kind of making sure that all these things are right and kind of vetting the results. But if that number stays true, that means that Mid-American is buying, you know, a lot of carbon in with their electricity. So it's got a lot of natural gas, maybe some coal, and we're kind of digging into what their sources of generation are to kind of try to figure that out. But if that plant is a Mid-American plant, because that's who supplies Moline, then yes, it would impact these numbers.
It's in the news today.
Yeah, that's interesting. Great. Well, great. Thank you for those good questions. I mentioned this project framework, and I want to orient you just a little bit to this because this is an important component of how the plan is structured and how ideas get filtered into and distributed throughout the plan. So what we've done is we've worked with the project team, Dawn and the rest of the team, to find categories into which strategies will be parsed. So you can see those strategies on this, or those categories on the slide: energy and buildings, transportation and mobility, resource management, resilience and adaptation has to do with that sort of resilience component of how the climate might be impacting Moline rather than the other way around. And then the innovative community column or category is things like engagement and education, equity and access, some perhaps partnerships, new partnerships that can be developed. Those would tend to fall into that bucket. So this is, you can think of these as chapters in the plan. And within each one of these, what we'll do is we'll develop very straightforward goals, then strategies that will hopefully achieve those goals, and then finally action steps that support those particular strategies. So they come in this kind of three-tiered method: goals, strategies, and actions. So with increasing specificity as we move through that framework.
You guys are all pretty familiar with that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, we all went to the same consulting seminar probably. So I want to talk just a little bit about stakeholder engagement. Anna mentioned that we have been involved in that and are here even this week doing that. 2 community workshops, one in person and one virtual. The steering committee has been super helpful. We met with them yesterday for, I think, either the second or third time, and super helpful in giving us guardrails and sort of keeping us on track. Obviously, these council presentations are a big part of it, and getting feedback from you as leaders of the community. That's very pivotal opportunities for us. We met with the environmental committee focus group today. Fantastic group, super engaged. Everybody talked and offered input, and so that was a really good time. Then we're also doing a number of surveys there. You can see we have a community survey that's out right now, and then a few other surveys that are coming. You may already know about this, but that logo over there on the right-hand side, this was developed through a competition that we did with your middle schools and high school. And Lana R., a freshman at Moline High School, won the competition. And so this was her design. And then I think our graphic designer sort of worked with it a little bit and got it into a reproducible format like that. But anyway, she did a great job. And so that's kind of part of what we did. And then we also mentioned this vulnerability assessment. We wanted to dive in just a little bit to this. This would, a lot of these activities would come in that resilience and adaptation chapter or category. So you can see across the top, there are 3 climate threats, then climate stressors, and then what we call non-climate stressors. Those are sort of the infrastructure that works with and goes back and forth with the climate impacts. But flooding, severe wind, extreme temperature, poor air quality, we've identified some of those things from the city. Some of the causes or things that can exacerbate those conditions are extreme precipitation, heat, temperature variability, and then Mary mentioned smoke from even other countries. So that's part of it. And then finally, non-climate stressors. These are some of the infrastructure that might be impacted or can impact those climate events. So we've delivered a draft of this and are iterating just a little bit with the project team on that. So the next slide here, we're going to get into a couple discussion questions. So let me just pause once again and see if there are any questions about some of this stuff. And yeah.
So also in the news, very recently was our inclusion basically smack dab in the new Tornado Alley. And so I've thought quite a bit about our, suspended electricity and internet and all of that. Just wondered if you guys had thought about that yet as you're putting that draft together.
So we have read about sort of the new Tornado Alley and what that means. We haven't gotten into much assessments in terms of redundancy for some of the major infrastructure, which would include certainly electricity supply. We were at your water and wastewater treatment plants, and of course, if something were to happen there, that would provide a big impact there as well. Those are probably not quite as susceptible, but still. So yes, we are taking a look at some of those things. The electricity, hopefully Mid-American, who I believe owns your distribution wires, is that right?
Yes.
Hopefully they're sort of on top of things, but it would be interesting, I think, to look at where you are in the feeder system and kind of where the distribution lines come in terms of redundancy, and at least just check those things out, because a conversation with I almost said Miss America with
Mid-America.
Mid-America. See, it's you get started there, right? Yeah. A conversation with Mid-America, may be advantageous just to see sort of what the city could do and how you could partner.
Thank you. Anyone else? Let's continue.
All right, so we have a couple of questions. The first one is just if you project to the future here, June comes around and you've been hearing about some of the specificity in the plan, what ideas have been bubbling up from the community. But when the environmental resiliency plan is successfully finished, what do you think will be different in Moline? Another way to ask this is, if this is a very successful project, what will it change here in Moline?
Are you asking about plan completion or plan implementation?
I'm just asking about what's different in the city as a result. So it could be either of those things.
Our whole, how we do infrastructure,
Okay,
right?
great.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's huge. The expense is huge when it has to be rebuilt. So are we using the right size pipes for stormwater, et cetera, right? For bigger storm events and all of that kind of thing. And obviously we want to provide some kind of energy cost reduction if we can. It's not just about the cleanliness. I mean, I'll be practical about the money.
Yeah.
And all of those kinds of things. Will people be able to feel it in some way, making a difference in the plan?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Can the community bounce back faster from these events? Are there cost savings? Can we identify those benefits for the city? Yeah, great.
Maybe some landscaping, rail, what are they called? gardens, thank you, rain gardens, so our downtown could look different. Could there be more solar panels and buildings, just different types of gardens, I guess, so visually, I'm kind of thinking what it might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So a more sort of environmentally engaging downtown area and perhaps other areas as well. And yeah, I like the clean energy reference as well, you know, perhaps solar powered municipal buildings. And I know you had a study done not too long ago that at least in theory provided, you know, supply that could equate to demand. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, Dan.
So I see the city leading by example. If you look at like the fire station or other municipal buildings, if we're working on energy efficiency or if it's stormwater, you know, best management practices, then, you know, we talked today about education and outreach that carries over to our residents with the plan. So maybe they have rain gardens, or maybe they want to start biking to work, or, you know, any of the other things that our residents can do, because that's the city that we are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that a lot, and it kind of gets to the demonstration or the lead by example that you know, that the city can do to sort of pave the way or show the way for residents.
I was just gonna just say that, we're protecting the future really too. We are leaving a better place for, you know, residents' children and making sure that they are left in a spot where they can, you know, kind of continue. So I think that is a big thing of what I'm hoping that comes out of this.
We drove around and saw your beautiful parks, your beautiful waterfront today, and yeah, great to preserve that for the next generation. So that's great. When it comes to implementation, and perhaps even barriers to implementation, we did have a couple of questions here. And the first one is just this: what recurring concerns might you hear most often from staff and residents? What do you hear that kind of bubbles up?
Cost. Fix the
Cost.
streets.
How much does this cost?
How
we're
We got taxes and fees.
Yeah.
Just the resistance to change, even
Mhm.
if it's good for you.
Mhm.
I would combine those. We talk about permeable surfaces for concrete. It's not cheap.
Mm.
It's better. It's better long-term. It's better for the environment. But we want quick and fast instead of good.
Yeah.
I think that's a human problem. But then this is when we talk about infrastructure, why would we want 1 mile when we could have 3 at the same cost?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. No, that's definitely a concern, and yeah, something that you all and we are certainly mindful of.
You know, I think one thing to be aware of in this question category is also, it's not, I mentioned resistance to change. That's normal too. That's a human problem. But it's the ability to accept that doing something a new way can be good. Right? That just because we're the first ones to try something doesn't make us crazy, right? It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it because no one else is doing it. It's that, what does it move us toward? And I was talking with staff who are involved in a special project with me, and I'm pretty much now obsessed with a new way of grading a city's like justice and equity and all of these kinds of things, it as the ability to thrive. So that's what I really hope comes out of this, is how do we move mindsets to understanding that thriving means X, Y, and Z for a city and the residents.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
You need to do a lot of ad. You need to have a lot of videos that, you know, you do this, you do that.
Kind of quick wins to show
people
success.
Love that because people are less rational than more emotional.
Yeah, Dan.
So it hasn't been a recurring concern I've heard, but today one of the things that stood out was a discussion around our trees. We've done a great job of, you know, with planting more trees every year, but we have a lot of older trees. Homeowners have a lot of dead trees in their yard. So when we're talking about being in Tornado Alley, we know what happened during the derecho. That that's something that with severe weather, I think we need to keep an eye on, right?
Yeah, I think that really goes into that resilience and adaptation component of, and there were a couple of interesting ideas I thought even this morning, in terms of plans and city partnerships and financing arrangements that might help with removal of some of those, particularly ones that are in, places where it might be very dangerous, but, yeah, I think that is a
The discussion was around homeowners that the cost is so much, and so, they've got dead trees in their yard that are waiting to fall on their neighbors.
So the idea was, I think, to like kind of for the city to maybe like hire somebody and then bill back via like the utility bill, a certain percentage, like over a period of time to pay that back.
Assessment. There was a couple different funding formulas that, I would welcome more discussion
Right.
on that because
But
I
Stephen,
think it's likely a concern.
Yeah, that's good, yeah, well, we've, now made an additional note of that, and I think that, it sounds like that is a pretty big concern. Yeah.
I will point out too, I think for the flip side of this, and it talks about resiliency also, is younger trees that can take on some of the water burden during floods. I post these old postcards of the city, what it looked like then and now, and there was a comment today on the old Elks Lodge, just across the street from wherever we are. Yeah, and
I saw that.
Yeah.
that was cool, yeah.
oh, okay. Someone said, it's funny what a few well-placed trees can do. Because we used to have elm trees all over the city. All these old pictures, trees abound, and then Dutch elm came and just flattened the entire city of trees. And I think like that is a good strategy, not only to prevent flooding issues, help clean the air, and absorb a lot of that water and rainfall. Just to really focus on planting the right trees and a good diverse stock so that we're not wiped out with one.
With one blight, well, that's great. Those are fantastic ideas. Let me move to this second question. It just says, what conditions would set this plan up for successful implementation? So, Abdur, you mentioned, sort of education and quick wins and, publicizing things. So that would certainly fall in that category. What other conditions do you think would help us set up for success? Yeah.
I think bouncing off that is just communication in general and explaining the why behind what we're actually doing and how it's going to benefit the not just the city, but how is it going to benefit you as a homeowner or you as a resident of Moline. I think sometimes, a lot of times, everyone's just worried about like themselves and how it's going to affect me personally. So yes, it's going to help Moline, but it's also going to help you in these ways by increasing your property value or by, you're going to be able to bounce back from a storm quicker, or I think that just the education piece is really important.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Highlighting benefits that really are, everybody can enjoy. They're enjoyed very broadly.
I think something that will be important is making sure that staff and council have an understanding of how to sort of assess those tools and understanding how much of an impact is that making, why are we picking this route versus others, kind of how to weigh that cost and the benefit against it. I think, it's because we'll understand what that is and like the big picture, right? Of course, it's like, okay, more trees is good. We know that, but like saying, oh, if we can push this and this is the most cost effective way to do it versus this is the biggest impact, or this is going after your biggest problem, sort of being able to help frame that from a process perspective that makes it easier for us to justify it here and explain it to the community.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I think we need to create buy-in through groups that currently exist with younger generations. So the high school has a Green Moline Club, I believe. more than one club that could be connected with. The park board has a youth advisory board. The library has a youth advisory board. I mean, that is exactly what we want for them to have experiences and to make an impact and have their voices heard. They talk about all this
Yeah.
environmental stuff in school. Like, let's give them a chance to see it in an application, right? And then also we're just creating more of a vision for the future as opposed to just meeting the need right now.
Yeah, maybe some of those action steps, would be tied in with school activities where they could be the implementers, and and there could be sort of a steady diet of that over time. I think one of the cool things about having students involved is, students sort of they can kind of affect their parents and kind of recruit them into the process, and I know that's happened to me in various various categories. So it definitely is. Yeah, it definitely happens.
I think partner organizations and, well, thanks staff. I think we had at the focus group today, a lot of the right people at the table. The partner organizations that were interested in supporting us, whether that's like being stewards of Green Valley or soil and water, participating in rain garden programs for homeowners. But I think that would help set us up to be successful, to have partner organizations that can help us implement elements of the plan.
Yeah, fantastic. And they can recruit their friends and their networks into it, and that's a great avenue for education and everybody else seeing the benefits. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
I just have one last thing, and I'm gonna say it, and I don't know if I should or not, but I think that kind of along with council knowing how to frame things, I think that we need to make sure that the message that we get to media is the same as well, to make sure they're telling the story, the right story, and telling the story the way we need them to, instead of like having like maybe focusing on something completely different or having a different headline that doesn't talk about what.
Does that happen?
Yeah,
What are you talking
right. I mean, sometimes the way that it's reported in the media or social media, it's different than what the actual is. So just making sure that the messaging to them and that they're getting that right message out is
That's
really
great.
important.
We're not allowed to control that.
I know we can control it, but just.
It's still be
That's
smart
on
about
top
it,
of our
right,
minds.
right.
Well, and we talk about education. The education could be within, say, the rain gardens. I believe one of the best examples I saw was in DC, where it showed you like little diagrams of how the water flows, where it goes, and what it actually does. And nobody told me. It was just right there. It had the pictures, and so anybody who walks by sees this thing, and there's an explanation as to what it is. So that right there, you skip the media, you skip like groups or whatever, whoever's in front of these things could be educated as to how they work. So
Yeah,
and
that's great.
Same thing could be done with solar or where you plug in your car, all these things. So all those could be opportunities to educate people.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, great. Well, I will. I'm going to ask this question. Is that my computer? No.
Someone joining?
Okay.
I don't know.
Someone started the meeting.
Sorry. If you don't mind, oh yeah, great. Or I guess I can control it here. So the third one, and I'm going to turn this over to Anna to kind of facilitate this, but what barriers have historically made it difficult to move resilience or sustainability projects forward? I mean, I think we've heard a couple of them, kind of resistance to change, cost barriers, things like that. But if there are other, perhaps more nuanced or kind of deeper in the weeds items, we'd love to make note of those things as well, just to be aware. Anna?
In terms of the barriers that historically made difficult to move resilience and sustainability projects forward, I mean, it could be, some of the examples I think already came up during this discussion. Sounds like, education, maybe a lack of knowledge sounds like that could be one of the barriers in this case. And, that's something for us to know to address in this plan. Are there any other examples like that?
I think money is always the biggest one, but
Yeah.
I think staff development can be a piece of that puzzle too. Like there's been times when I had approached and talked about it and everyone's like, we love that idea, but that's entirely different from the way we handle it now. And now I've got to get trained up and then I have to keep on enough staff to do it both ways because some infrastructure is one way and some isn't. So like, it'd be really easy if it's just a new thing, but to transition, like we talked about like reservoir kind of things, trying to go into using a prairie method instead of a big concrete slab. But that's just a whole different process. And so working through that and how to develop a staff that we could eventually move toward that is definitely a challenge.
Local government regulations oftentimes govern direction. You'll hear it in the private sector as much as you hear it in the public sector. It impacts every project that we do. You know, and then there's the state regulations on top of that, which can sometimes prevent you from achieving what you're trying to do here. So I mean, that's definitely a hindrance that's been out there. It's been out there forever. Locally, we might be able to make changes for smart growth purposes. Right, you have an opportunity to do that with the comprehensive plan. That's certainly the time to be talking about smart growth and what we're going to do. You know, not only internally with the built environment that we have, but when the future environment we want to build south of the airport, whatever that might be. You know, and we're going to set a great example, for example, down by the riverfront. You know, with the geothermal that we're planning on putting in, and not putting in concrete or asphalt, we're putting in the traditional old street surfaces down there. It's going to be a model actually of what's possible, and it becomes the educational center.
Yeah.
For the future, not just of Moline, but those people here in the Quad Cities and around us are really cool.
Yeah, but these are interconnected, and like regulation could also create cost hurdles that
Absolutely.
just becomes a loop on that.
Well, speaking of regulation, I think being brave enough to create a regulation that changes behavior is historically a barrier. I mean, 5 years ago, just about a former alderperson who's no longer with us wanted to just up and just ban plastic bags, right? That would change behavior. But the inability to see what the replacement behavior could be and could it be equitable for everyone, right? Like, does everyone have enough money for the canvas bags they need? Do we give up enough other bags, which sometimes are made of plastic as well, right? At all these events where people could have enough. Like, those layers of bravery, basically, that you have to work through to actually create a regulation that actually changes behavior. I think it's, we haven't moved on that idea.
This is, when we talk about resilience and sustainability projects, for some reason in our culture, these are viewed through a culture war lens and either viewed as based on fake science or waste of money, or you're just doing this because, corruption, right? Your friend is
bike lanes.
Timmy and bike lanes, right? Yeah, great example. But so like the public, I don't know what the percentage is, but there isn't a big enough amount that are vocal against anything green because they don't believe it, or they don't think it works, or what's wrong with gas, coal, and asphalt because it's been working for 100 years. And so and this comes back to resistance to change, but also not trusting the education or the mouthpieces. And so I think that trust it comes down to trust at that point.
Yeah. So it's like trust in, we talk about education, lack of education is a barrier, but then another barrier on top of that is like trust. And I wonder if the potential solution or kind of a way to address that, like what are the kind of sources that these particular groups trust? Like, are there sources like that, and how can we find them? How can we partner with those sources to be able to address these communication barriers and education barriers? So I mean, that's something else to think about. But also, you mentioned that community could be against anything green, and there are ways to communicate some initiatives related to sustainability in the same language, like cost savings are interesting to everyone, presumably. So there are ways to package it a little bit differently to not bring out the environmental side of things.
I think just generally the economy has an impact. I keep coming back to the homeowners and if they were to implement projects to make their homes more energy efficient, or if they were to take care of the trees, right now we're in a time where many families are struggling, right, to pay bills, buy the groceries and all those things. So a lot of these things, either at the municipal level or the homeowners they come at a great cost.
Yeah.
So, that will matter.
But if a tree crashes into their house,
Yeah.
also a great cost.
It's just like a medical emergency that you can't pay the insurance for, and there it is. That's what, so.
They're gambling.
Yeah, so, but I did, on that note, I wanted to point out, somebody in the focus group pointed out the workshops that CDC is doing to help owners fix up their house, but how that might piggyback on education around upgrades to make homes more energy efficient and different practices. I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, and I mean, yeah, there are always trade-offs, and I guess that's why we're having these conversations to understand what trade-offs are, that make sense in certain contexts versus not.
So, if I think that, as a human being, we are always interest-seeking being, and we are always want to have an immediate result of anything. And immediately we think, oh, would it benefit me? Oh, yeah, even if it is penny, I will go for that. But as far as environmental issue is concerned, it has a long down effect. You have to wait for a long time to have a good result. That's why it is not easy to implement. It is not easy to make the people understand. That's the main issue.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the even harder part of it is like different people have different languages they speak in terms of what resonates with them, and I think it's very different to everyone in different groups. So that's definitely a barrier.
Another challenge I see is that the fact we're part of the quad cities, so there's multiple cities all around us. So anything we do might be all great here, but we're still surrounded by other cities that could be shying away from these kind of things. And really, if somebody say we do ban bags, well, somebody might just go to Rock Island or East Moline to shop because they want the bags and they reuse them or whatever. And that's just one little example. I think you do need to have a bigger buy-in beyond just us, because the cities in the world that take big steps when they do this. They implement big plans. They'll do gardens up, just bridges and all these things, but they do a massive plan and it's a large area, so it has a big effect. I just think our size, that's a challenge, especially being surrounded in different counties, different state, all of that, and also have a negative effect too.
Yeah.
And they voice their opinion too, even if they don't live here.
Right.
So they all know. So big challenge.
Are there any other notes about barriers or challenges? I have one more discussion question here is, this is the last one for today, is what are the top 3 initiatives you would like to see as a part of this plan? It doesn't have to be 3, it can also be 4, 5, or less. So I encourage everybody to be, as ambitious or unambitious as you want, because you were saying that sometimes you need to be brave and, propose something new or exciting. So welcome initiatives like that, or examples like you might have seen in other communities. It doesn't have to be feasible. We just want your input on this one to understand what everybody's thinking about.
I have an idea of where I want that initiative to be. Like, I have an idea of what I want to accomplish, and then I think the initiative itself will have to be coming from the plan. But I would love to see us finding ways to incorporate more natural solutions into our infrastructure. I mean, I gave the example of using a prairie instead of a big basin. Mr. Macias had brought up the using like rain gardens to capture those. And I would love to see us able to move something like that forward and having a way to build that plan out. Because it has been complicated and hard to make happen.
We can put green space in the center of roundabouts. And then we don't rely on electricity for traffic lights, all the benefits of that. Just saying, it's an idea. Butterfly gardens, pollinator gardens in the center.
If I say main green water, is that too overarching, including like our rivers and our stormwater? Like that would be a top initiative.
Yeah, there's a lot of options in there. Like, I mean, I think that's good to know, like, what you're thinking about in general as a priority, but if you have specific examples or bring projects you want to share with us.
I'll leave it that big today.
We'll have to think about that one.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more residential solar power in the city using more solar going forward.
I'd like to see the resiliency piece, since we know bad weather events are coming. I don't ever remember what they're called, but I brought it back to you from a US Conference of Mayors thing, like these like battery pack type places, like where that they're storing energy whenever there's not a problem, and then you can go there and like charge your phones and I mean
Like
it's
a
large.
resiliency center?
Yes, a resiliency hub. That
Resiliency hub.
Resiliency
So you
hub.
must have told.
I remember talking about yeah, something like what are we gonna do? We can't just depend on Mid-America to help us bounce back quickly and whatever their plans are. We can have resiliency hubs scattered throughout the city, where people can go and get some of what they need.
I would love our city to be organized in such a way that we do not rely so much on fossil fuels to meet basic needs. And so that can be multimodal, it can be public transit, it can be bringing services closer to homes so that we're not, it's a large contributor to greenhouse gas. And I think like building a city that is conducive to that would be ideal.
Definitely. Wanting to follow up on something you said about the resiliency hubs. Something like the idea was circulated as, cooling/warming shelters, which essentially like in various like, extreme weather events could serve as these kind of like hubs, but we didn't even think as far as having them as places where people can go and even charge their phones or, in case of power outages.
Well, I mean, the economic devastation when people can't get on the internet and conduct their business from home, right? Or they have to drive, maybe their car's totaled by a tree that fell on it, right? They have to go somewhere where there is the internet. Whatever we can do to get people back online faster, that's where I think those resiliency hubs would be an essential component. And of course, like you can't have the whole town descend on just a few hubs.
Yeah.
But we can come up with systems where, okay, you get to use it from this time to this time, or whatever it is, or we build enough of them at the right size in the right places that we can spread it out across the city well. It's just something I came across that we haven't been able to explore yet because we didn't get to this place yet collectively. Okay, is that it? Got another presentation tonight.
That's it from us. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate your questions and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll move to our comprehensive plan progress update. Omar Johnson, Collaborative, and Mr. Matthias.
Having to reach me here.
Okay.
They've been having some connection issues, so we're just gonna try and get them to join here.
There you go.
All right.
There they are.
So we've got LJC on the line here. Thank you for having us here to give you an update on our comprehensive plan. As you know, and Bob has said a couple times, our date that we're highlighting is November of this year to adopt this plan. So LJC is here, Leslie Roth with LJC to kind of give you an update on where we're at in the process. We're about a quarter of the way through, and like any planning process, it really starts with your existing conditions, right? Finding out what the current setting is, so then you can figure out where you're gonna go. So with that, I'm gonna let Leslie take it away, and thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you so much for having us. Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Roth. I'm a principal with LJC Design and Engineering. I'm joined by Holly Nolan, who is an associate with LJC and the project manager on this effort. We're really excited to be the prime consultant on this contract. We love the city of Moline and have experience there previously on the Illinois 92 corridor as well as Avenue of the Cities. Today, I'm going to take you through a brief summary of the first deliverable that we recently submitted for staff review and comment, which is the existing conditions report. As mentioned, our project schedule goes through the end of fall of this year. We are currently in the second phase of the project, which is investigate. We're just beginning to create the vision and goals for the project. We have a workshop planned later in March. And a number of focus group one-on-one interviews with area stakeholders, leaders, and champions in the community to begin to gather community voice that will be added to that second document. In phase 3, we will begin to compile what we've heard through public engagement activities, the existing conditions report to create key recommendations, which will form the basis and foundation of the comprehensive plan update draft plan. And in the last phase of the project, this fall, we will finalize the comprehensive plan. As I've mentioned, public engagement is not considered a phase by this consultant team. This is something that we will continue to build on throughout the process. We also have an advisory committee that, oh, I'm not sharing screen. Sorry about that. Just talking away.
You're easy to follow, Leslie. You're doing great.
How about now?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, thank you, Hallie. Sorry about that. It's better with visuals. As I mentioned, public engagement will run throughout the duration of this process. We also have an advisory or steering committee that will meet with our consultant team and review deliverables at the end of each one of the phases to provide review and comment. So I'll give you a brief summary of the existing conditions report. When we set out to review the body of past planning that the city has done, as well as analyze a number of different data sets and on-the-ground conditions in the city of Moline, we really wanted to make sure that we were not making people repeat themselves or regurgitating information that you've seen before. We also wanted to make sure that we were not including information that was not useful to the city moving into the future. So the existing conditions report really begins to identify gaps in planning, reports, plans, and geographies within the city. And it also looks at important data sets that will help shape the future of the city that we thought needed to bubble to the top to make sure that we included as we move forward with this year-long process. So in chapter 1, this is an introduction to the city. We did do a brief history. We thought that this was important in level setting, what the city has accomplished, what the city is built on, what the city is really proud of, the successes, and also identifying what those challenges are. We also wanted to identify what some of the opportunities are. What is Moline doing really, really well? What are areas that we want to highlight, that we want to lift up, and the direction that we want to keep moving in? But there's also opportunity for course correction in areas that we recognize the city needs to address before moving into the future and fulfilling its promise as a strong city in the Quad Cities and in the region. So this chapter really begins to set the table for the planning context and where Moline is today. We also have already started community engagements. I mentioned we have a workshop coming up in March, and this part of this first deliverable talks about the kind of plan that we plan to implement in terms of public engagement. The city has done a lot of planning in the last few years. We understand that there could be a little bit of planning fatigue. So this process is really focused on elevating voices that have not been elevated in previous planning processes. We're being really intentional about having underrepresented participation, youth, non-English speakers, as well as helping people understand the status of the city and identifying key themes to make sure that we have thought leadership and those that are interested, giving them a place to participate within this process. Chapter 2 is the community profile. This really begins to identify the city's neighborhood features, community assets, gathering places, and identification of civic, historic, and institutional landmarks within the city. This chapter also talks a lot about Moline's character, understanding the industrial heritage, as well as lifting up citywide anchors that are really important to the city's future as well. If you squint your eyes at this map on the right, you'll see that not the entirety of the city is covered with community assets. That's the big takeaway from this chapter, is beginning to understand where there are gaps in service or where there are gaps in quality of life amenities and beginning to address those later on down the line throughout the comprehensive planning process. Chapter 3 reviewed dozens of past plans and reports, as well as a number of concurrent and ongoing plans. One of them you just heard earlier this evening. We think these are really important in shaping the future of the city, as well as informing recommendations in the comprehensive plan. As I mentioned before, we really don't want this to be a waste of everyone's time. We want to make sure that relevant components, elements, recommendations, and strategies from those past plans and reports are part of the comprehensive plan. This update will also give legs to those previous plans to make sure that we're all pointed into the direction of the plans that are still relevant, so that we can breathe new life into some of those plans that may have sat on the shelf. There's also an opportunity in this chapter to review common themes across planning efforts, so that, again, we're not duplicating past actions and planning processes, but we're really identifying where that alignment exists. This timeline shows you a brief snapshot of some of the plans that we reviewed. When we went through this presentation with the steering committee, we actually learned of about 7 other plans that we will incorporate into this chapter as well. Many of the plans have already been adopted. Many of the plans are already in use by city departments, by NGOs, by partner and sister organizations in the city, by other nonprofit organizations, or others in the city that find these plans to be useful even when they are not adopted. So this was a really important part of identifying how we wanted to move forward and which direction we wanted to move forward, thinking about the next phase of the project in vision and goals. Chapter 4 started to get into demographics and socioeconomic trends. We reviewed the existing population of Moline, what some of those key demographic trends were that we were seeing. We reviewed the existing labor force and understanding which market sectors are where that workforce is distributed. We also looked at how the city of Moline compared to its neighbors in the Quad City, as well as the region as a whole. We reviewed population change within the city, and as you can imagine, Moline is fairly similar to other cities in the region and in the country in the way that it's reflecting new population and demographic trends. We're excited to dig into this process to understand how Moline can begin to attract and retain residents, as well as understanding why residents decide to live in Moline. We believe that an attraction and retention strategy can help develop the kind of workforce that will move Moline into the future. What goes along with housing or what goes along with workforce and the rest of the population and employment trends is housing, of course. So we did a lay of the land in terms of physical development, looking at key housing trends, and we looked at actually physical development by market sector, which you'll see later in this summary. We also wanted to understand what types of housing were available in Moline, the tenure, the price points, and how that really related to the workforce and population of the city. What we noticed in Moline is that it's a fairly diversified workforce. There is some opportunity for additional job growth. Through this process, we want to begin to understand how emerging technologies, industry, and future-focused workforce trends can be part of the strategies as Moline continues to grow, and being able to define what success metrics are for the city and preparing for that when we start looking at the future economic situation of residents. Chapter 5 focused on a market analysis. So for this one, we looked at, as I mentioned, a variety of real estate types. We also not only analyzed what we were seeing on the ground and what we saw in data looking backwards, but we also wanted to begin to understand what future market opportunities there were in the city. So within the retail market sector, we looked at not only the corridors, but also opportunity for retail and commercial growth within neighborhoods. We did identify several commercial corridors. Many of those you're already familiar with, but we also wanted to look at the distribution of commercial and retail development, and if there were opportunities for additional development or commercial and retail trends that could be more responsive to consumers today and tomorrow. With industrial trends, we looked at where industrial development was already happening in the city, as well as identifying locations in the city that may be good candidates in the future. Of course, at LJC, we do a lot of industrial work, and we have a very good understanding of what site selectors are looking for. So bringing that real life experience to the city will help identify what the best practices are moving forward and how to make decisions about which types of industrial could benefit the city in the future. For office trends, Moline is not very different than many other cities that we're seeing in the nation. There has not been a lot of growth in the office market, and part of it is, you can guess, is sustained post-pandemic work from home trends or hybrid. This is something that we're finding is pretty sticky in terms of workforce that we're seeing enter the market. People like to have flexibility, and so understanding what types of office would be successful in the city of Moline, as well as looking at hospitality and hotel trends. What does the tourism market mean for Moline? Is there a way to capture more of the attention of folks coming to the Quad Cities area and preparing the city for what that means, particularly in light of new riverfront development? But there's a lot more to see in the city, and making sure that people are aware of all the places to go and identifying if there could be new tourist destinations within the city. Chapter 6 of the existing conditions report focused on multimodal mobility. We looked at all different types of mobility, from pedestrians and bikes, trail connections, sidewalk gaps. We looked at the bus network, transit, train, as well as understanding what the specific conditions of these networks were that needed to be improved. Safety was a big part of that analysis, and beginning to understand where there's intersectionality between these modes, how we can make the system more functional, efficient, and safer for all modes. This particular map shows where crashes happen, and you can begin to notice some patterns of where faster moving traffic along major corridors results in conflicts, particularly with peds and bikes. Understanding this analysis will help us begin to create recommendations to improve safety throughout the network, the roadway network, as well as create opportunities for folks to be able to have better connections when changing modes. Within the bike and transit networks, we did an analysis of surface frequency as well as location. Looking at where bike facilities are, the next phase of the project will really begin to look at origin and destination. Where are people trying to get to? Where would they like to go? The frequency of, we know that there's a very avid bike community in the city, and so beginning to understand how to make either commuting or leisurely, just leisurely bike rides more safe and enjoyable for everyone. Chapter 7 focuses on land use in the city of Moline. We looked at existing land use patterns, how they were functioning. We did an overview of the zoning ordinance. We know that you're going through an update now. Part of the exercise of this comprehensive plan will ensure that there is alignment and coordination between the new zoning ordinance. We also are looking at key opportunity areas. There's several areas in the city that have a lot of potential that could potentially, that we want to look at to make sure that when we're thinking about development patterns, that both land use and zoning are aligned. Throughout the course of this project, we'll be looking at a number of different sub-area opportunities. These were identified with staff and the steering committee to make sure that we were looking at areas that did have a lot of opportunity, and that could be pilot or test cases for other areas of the city. Some of the elements can be shared between these sub-areas and other neighborhoods, corridors, or areas with similar characteristics in the city. So this will give you a very good sense of what some of the conceptual design direction could be in these different sub-areas. There are several of them, as you can see, and many of them, well, all of them will have key recommendations and strategies. We will also develop a series of visualizations and renderings to visualize what the opportunities in terms of physical environments could be in each one of these sub-areas. Chapter 8 focuses on housing. We know this is a hot topic in Moline, and we're excited about digging into it more throughout the course of this project. In this chapter, we analyze the existing conditions of housing stock, tenure, current and future housing needs. We looked at the cost of housing. We looked at the owner-renter mix, as well as all of the different types of units that are available in the market in the city of Moline, as well as building permits. What we notice here is that there's quite a bit of aging housing stock. The city has a lot of really beautiful neighborhoods, but we know that there is not equal distribution of new construction. We also notice that there is an overabundance of certain types of housing and underabundance of other types of housing based on the existing conditions of the population, including household incomes in the city. So building on the data in this particular chapter, we needed to have a lay of the land to understand which direction, what questions to ask, and which direction we wanted to move in to take a nuanced approach to making recommendations for housing in the city. We did look at affordability in terms of, based on household income, we looked at rental trends, and we looked at the rental burden, the cost burden as well. Again, trying to understand what attainable housing means for the city, what types of housing are desired based on the demand that we're seeing in this data, as well as how do we move forward and what location should housing be proposed in. Home value trends was another aspect of the existing condition analysis. This is the home ownership slide that we're looking at here. This is looking at how much homeowners can afford in the city of Moline, as well as what their burden is when they decide to enter the home ownership market. So understanding this helps us begin to extrapolate what reasonable price points of housing could be in the city of Moline that could be marketable, as well as matching that to location and housing type. The third slide in the housing chapter that you're seeing now, just in terms of key observations, looks at affordability. So now we're looking at generally subsidized housing, the location of those units, and the number of those units. This is something that we always like to look at because we know different slices of the population in communities need different things. So beginning to understand what the distribution of subsidized units are helps us understand what the need is moving forward with housing recommendations. Chapter 9 focuses on parks, open space, and natural systems. One of the things that the team loves about Moline is the ravine system and the topography. And so beginning to look at what that ecological context means for development, for recreation, and for tourism. We also wanted to make sure that we're setting Moline up for a fruitful future. We're going through the ERP process now, and so recommendations in this chapter will be coordinated with other sustainability and climate resiliency goals. We did look at topography and slope analysis. We know that all of this is related to storm events. The rivers, both rivers are definitely contributors to the way that the city is experienced, but also the way that that potentially flooding and stormwater events are managed. So beginning to understand that topography will help us provide recommendations for appropriately responsive infrastructure. We did look at flood risk along the river. As you can imagine, those are the areas of the city that have the highest flood risk. There are some higher areas that are less endangered, but beginning to understand how to make recommendations for development in concert with what possibilities there are for flooding within the city will help begin to identify opportunities for green infrastructure and other resiliency related measures. We also looked at parks and open space. Moline is fairly well covered in parks. There are opportunities to propose new areas of gathering outside and areas of recreation. We also want to investigate throughout the course of this project how these park areas are connected and how neighborhoods are served by public parks. So this gives us a baseline to understand where existing parks are located, what the amenities are in each one of those parks, and from a system-wide perspective, if there are any gaps, what opportunities there are to ensure that all residents of Moline are able to take advantage of outside. That's the existing conditions report. I realized I went fairly quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions. We do have a workshop coming up in March. We just secured the event, so flyers will be going out in the coming weeks. Over the next phase of the project, which we're calling Investigate, we'll be developing vision statements for each one of the key topic areas that you saw in the ECR, as well as associated goals for each one of those. The start of that process will be at our public workshop. We will crowdsource some of those vision statements and goals to better understand what the priority of residents of Moline are. And then we will share those statements with the steering committee and get their ideas also to make sure that as we're working through this process, that we're incorporating as many voices as possible to make sure that this document is reflective of the direction that the city wants to go in. Our next steering committee meeting will be in person in April, and we will begin to investigate vision and goals at that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Questions from council? It was very thorough. Thank you for those of you that are serving on. I think that's it. Unless there's
fantastic. Well, we encourage you all to take a peek at the ECR. You should have been, I think a link was shared for that document. It's great nighttime reading. So if you have any other thoughts about this document as we move through this process or anything else, always feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you,
Thank
Haley.
you so much.
Is there any further public comment this evening? Hearing none, miscellaneous business, just a thank you to those of you that covered for me while I've been at, mayor-related duties. It's always a lot, US Conference of Mayors. Got to present on our childcare program and answer good questions from communities that haven't been able to invest like we were able to. And then also was able to present, on the Great River Trail because the Rails to Trails Conservancy was one of the sponsors of the Mayor's Innovation Project, and they asked me to do their little spiel so that they didn't have to do their little spiel. But it was nice to be able to connect with Visit Quad Cities on some of that information and with staff that had information. So thank you for going to events, and I did put up there the Just City Index. This is part of the program that Mr. Matthias and Mr. Davies are involved with me in the Just City Mayor's Fellowship that I was at last week. And so those are, it's like a bunch of alphabet soup that I would like to work through with folks so that we can work on the East End revitalization project together with this common vocabulary. I don't know how long it'll be there, but.
It'll be up there for as long as you would like it.
Okay, all right, fine. All right, so to my right, you are last, so.
I have nothing.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just, Bob and I attended the, Indiana, is it Indiana? Illinois, Iowa Federation.
Yes.
Their contract.
They have a long.
Thank you. Awards, and, we were given the award for, best project, for our South Slope. And, so where the award is, Bob?
It's right behind you. Open the door, you can reach it.
Well, I'll bring it out.
Bring it out. It's just right on the counter. It's supposed to go over to our utilities director. I haven't seen yet. I see her, she gets it.
South Slope wastewater treatment plant, was a project of the year, so, I accepted on behalf of council, the staff, mayor, and, yeah. But it was a good event. We got to, hear also from the other projects that got awards and, meet the group that's, working on this massive, huge project. It kind of put into perspective being around folks that do major construction projects, how big of a project it was, so. Yeah, that's it, just wanted to share that.
No, nothing, Your Honor.
Nothing today.
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm not gonna,
We have executive session.
very brief.
Yes, Your Honor, I make a motion that the council convene an executive session for the purpose of discussion of pending, probable, or imminent litigation -5 ILCS 120/2C11.
Second.
Roll call, please. All the persons saying.
President?
Okay.
Oh, apologies. Aye.
Aye. Castro. Aye. Smith.
Also, I.
Murphy.
Aye.
Garcia. Gonzalez.